So good morning, everyone. Today's session is the final session for academic writing skills, and it's the assignment discussion session. So before we go on to doing the assignment, I'm going to give you a summary of what we did in each session, so you've got a better idea of doing the assignment. The elements that we need to cover are learning outcome 1, 2, and 3. And the examples we use within this assignment for the questioning are only examples, okay? So you need to come up with your own question for your assignment. The other thing is you need to make sure that when we go through the structure and things like that, your Harvard referencing, how you reference things, how you identify certain elements. A lot of this is already on Moodle for your learning outcome 1, 2, and 3, okay? So in learning outcome 1, we looked at academic purpose, what academic writing was, why there's a need to have academic writing and the importance of academic writing within any sort of profession, why we need to write for the purposes of that. So we looked at the different, what academic writing was, the types of academic writing. We looked at 1.1, which is to interpret the meaning and implications of a specific question. So we looked at what open questions were, what closed questions were. And we also looked at a question example. Now, this is an example, so you don't necessarily, I mean, you have to this is an example for you to look at, so it gives you an idea. So the question we looked at was to describe the possible implications a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending their GP surgery. Now, we looked at the question and we kind of broke the question up. What is the question asking us? And highlighted the important points. So the first element of it was to look at what describing meant. Also to look at the implications of a diagnosis for hypertension and what this implications would have on a patient. So we went up and we broke the question into elements that we thought were important as well, that you needed to cover, and what the question actually meant. So what am I being asked to do here? So you're being asked to consider what hypertension, the implications of hypertension. So we went on to look at the question. We went on to identify the key concepts. So when you're presented with a question, the important elements, so the structure, why is words important in a question, that you identify the importance of certain words? Why do you think command words are important? Anyone, why do you think words are so important when answering a question? Do they help you answer the question properly?
Yeah, that's what helps you to answer or do the work.
Yeah, what they expect you to do. So if something expects you to describe, suggest, explain, them are what the command words, and they tell you what you need to do to produce an answer. So examples are, we looked at an example which looked at explain the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And then number 2, describe the difference. Each of these means something different and analyze the difference. So we looked at an example question as well, and what the expectation of you in each question was to do. We then went on to look at, in learning outcome 1, we went to look at the command words. So analyze, assess, compare, and contrast, and critically examine, define, describe, discuss, and evaluate. We then went on to the importance of Harvard referencing, and this is so important when it comes to referencing any sources that you are using for your assignment. So if you are using doing an assignment, you know, you need to make sure that you are using Harvard referencing within that assignment. So you're identifying what your sources are. Why do you think Harvard referencing is so important? Anyone, why do you think Harvard referencing is so important? If you are using work from the internet or from a book, and you're saying it's your work, what does that identify?
It means it's plagiarizing.
Plagiarize. Yeah, so it identifies that you plagiarize something. But if you reference it, you're saying you're using it. You're not plagiarizing it. You need to make sure you're using the Harvard referencing system. And that's the one that's used within UK Varsity. We watched a video on Harvard referencing, and we also looked at a summary of what we've done and some referencing. So this was for learning outcome 1, okay? I'm quickly going through because this is already done for you already, but I just need you to have a summary of what we've been through, okay? Learning outcome 2. No. Share this. So learning outcome 2, we were advised here to look at producing a written response to an appropriate format. And we looked at what a written response was. We looked at the 5 C's of effective business writing and, you know, what each one meant. Do you remember the 5 C's, anyone?
5 C.
Sorry?
Anyone? One of the 5
concise.
Concise, excellent, yeah.
Accurate.
Correct, yes, very good, yeah. Clear?
Yeah.
Complete and courteous, okay? So anyone reading your work you are able to address the person politely. You know, it's so important. Then we also looked at the 7 C's. Clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, courteous. And we looked at the importance of each one of them and why there was a need to have one when you're doing something. So you need to identify when you're looking at it being clear, you need to identify and, you know, making the objective clear, okay? Concise, keep it clear and to the point. Concrete, be specific, not vague. Correct, to avoid any typo errors. Coherent, does the message make sense and flow? Complete, does the message contain everything it needs? And courteous, being polite. So these are really important when we're looking at the learning outcomes. We also looked at 2.1, which was to devise a detailed plan for a written response to a specific question. When you're given a question to answer, often it's the most difficult task to get it started. And I see that is, you know, whilst teaching on the degree I teach on, that is some of the students struggle to get the assignment started. Once it's started, they're able to identify the elements of it and look at the points around it. It's just that starting point is sometimes difficult. We then went on to look at the conventions, the 5 conventions of writing, academic writing, like cohesion, clarity, consistency, conciseness, and completeness. And how this follows a logical argument and a logical pattern as well. So there's more structure in place for that. Planning is really important. Why is planning so important when we look at assignments?
To be able to cover every part of it.
Yes. To cover every part of it, you need to plan it, don't you? You need to have an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. We then went on to look at spidergrams, which I'll give you an example in a little while what it is. So it identifies the question, you just branch off from that in the diagram. And the importance of using these in assignments as well. And we also looked at 2.2, which was to use the plan to write a coherent and logical response to a question. So, you know, we had the question and we work around the question to have an introduction, a main body, a conclusion, and reference list. We then went on to 2.3, which was to present the response in an appropriate format. So bearing in mind, we're using that example from learning outcome 1, which is to describe the possible implications a diagnosis would have on hypertension. We looked at the introduction. So here, what we would have in the introduction. So explain the term hypertension, explain the incidence of hypertension in the UK, how many people are treated for hypertension in the UK by their GPs, and explain what treatment for hypertension can entail. And we looked at explaining the long-term implications of non-treatment. The main body, here we go on to the possible impact the diagnosis could have on the patient, positive versus negative. So the positive one allows the patient to have a diagnosis and have reassurance of being treated. The positive allows the GP to explain the implications for the patient and allay any inaccurate assumptions. And then the negative is depression at the diagnosis of the chronic disease and also the effects on the individual. Then we had a conclusion. Here, what we'll do is we'll get everything together and summarize everything. And we look at it with examples and we provide a reference list. Again, referencing is using the Harvard system. So that was learning outcome 2. We then went on to look at learning outcome 3, which is a final learning outcome. Have you got any questions on these learning outcomes at the moment? So we looked at learning outcome 3, which is to use language, style, and conventions appropriate to academic writing. Here we looked at the language and the style and conventions. So, you know, why it's so important that we use pronouns and the types of pronouns, what pronouns are, and they're like a phrase that is used as a substitution for a noun. We also looked at a video on academic writing skill. We looked at writing accurately 3.1 following accepted written language conventions. For example, if you were asked to provide your answer to a hypertension question to a group of doctors, you may, you know, have more technical terms and details to answer it. But if you were doing this to someone else, they would need need to be changed. So, for example, hypertension can lead to we gave an example of a question that would be relevant to doctors on the hypertension example, and then looked at how it'd be used for a lay person. So it could, you know, what the impact would be, what, you know, how someone would portray a question. You and me may look at a question differently, but if you have a doctor, he may need the, you know, the pronouns, and he may need the wording that refers to a heart and things like that. So, for example, if it's for a doctor, he would understand what hypertension can lead to congestive cardiac failure and myocardial infarction. Whereas if it's a lay person, you would say that high blood pressure can stop the heart working properly and can lead to a heart attack. Why do you think we need to simplify it for the lay person?
For them to understand better.
And it's clear to understand as well.
Yeah, it's clear for them to understand. And it's also for them to understand it better. So the doctor will understand the top bit. And then a layperson like you, well, like me, would only understand what we try to identify through the wording. So making it sound basic. So we looked at factual writing, we looked at academic writing, and we looked at the style of the official style of writing. We then went on to looking at changing the following sentence starters from first person to a third person, from I to they, I to she, and then I to he. So these are working in the third person, and that is something that we need to look at as well. We then went on to look at the standardization help to set the tone in writing. So the tone is the manner of characteristics of writing itself. So it being formal writing style, maintaining impersonal or third person tense, not using I, use of sophisticated vocabulary related to the question being asked, avoiding slang terms or jargon, because that's really important in any organizations to avoid using that. We then went on to looking at 3.2, which is use appropriate style and register, showing an awareness of the audience. So it's really important that you know the text purpose, you understand your audience, you know, because you'll have different audiences. Like we said, you may have a doctor or you may have a 20 layperson that you need to talk to. So you need to identify that you're able to get everything across to that person. The other element which is quite important is the style. So all texts have a style. You have a factual, academic, official, instructional, journalistic, and fictional. And we went through each one. So factual texts found in many places like newspapers, magazine, textbooks, and internets. And they're a formal style, backed up with statistics and evidence. Academic texts is similar to factual texts, but it includes the elements of factual writing. So there's more detail, and it's more clear and logical, and it can differ from the sources you've used. It usually includes technical or very specific vocabulary. So that's academic text. So we then went on to look at what official text was. And these are things like business letters, business proposals, formal language, how you have to be polite, especially in letters, extreme detail, especially in legal documents, possible languages that you use in things like Latin, neutral and impersonal language. We then went to look at instructional texts, which are may include wikis or manuals. So this could be a manual to a washing machine or a manual to a microwave on how you use it, the technical vocabulary subject to the, you know, like it might be illustrations. It might be you putting a wardrobe together and them having pictures on how that wardrobe will be put together and how you need to look at producing that wardrobe. We then went on to look at journalistic texts, and these are things like tabloid. So you could have more serious ones and you can have opinion-based ones. And the more serious ones are subject matter, and they are less eye-catching than the opinionated one. And there's something that's happening at the moment, you know, or there's fewer images and there's more there's less opinions as well in the serious one, whereas in the opinion tabloid, there's more opinions and they could actually refer from mild to extreme opinions, and they're more emotive as well. So these are things like magazines, newspapers, online pieces, and they could vary depending on the style. You know, it might be something that you're talking about that's quite important, and I will mention things maybe something to do with you know, a war in the country. Would that be more serious, or would it be an opinion piece? If you're talking about a war in a country, is that something serious, or is it an opinion piece?
No, it's something serious because of the world war.
Yes, it is something serious. So must you address that in a different way then as well?
Yeah.
Yes, you must be quite sympathetic, mustn't you? And quite caring to what you're saying.
Yeah.
We then went on to fictional texts, and these are like stories, poems, novel scripts. So things that are often quite florid. These are sometimes things for children as well. It might be a book that's got pictures in. You know, it might be poems that have, you know, or novel that might have pictures, characteristics. And it's how they write it as well. Well, is it more organized? Are the chapters in it? We then went on to 3.3, which is use accurately a standard form of referencing reflecting a range of sources. So this is a use of a useful term for the unit academic skills, to be clear, concise, focused, structured, and backed up by evidence as well. It's the purpose of all of this is to identify that you're able to understand what is being written in a formal style, but also it's not complex, and it doesn't require long sentences and complicated vocabulary. So you are making sure that the person who's reading it is able to understand what you're writing. So that is the final one on learning outcome 3. What I do want to show you is there are some things that I do want to show you that may help you towards. Let's have a look if I can find it. So these are things like a spidergram, and they're really important because, some people don't understand what spidergrams. That was in learning outcome 2, what we looked at. It's just an example, an additional reading for you, and these are all on Moodle for you, okay? So if you're looking at doing a spidergram and you're doing something in regards to planning a CV, this is how you would look at a spidergram. That I've worked here, my education, these are my qualities, these are your hobbies. Has anyone ever used a spidergram or to help them do something, or, do an assignment or do any sort of revision or anything like that?
No. No.
Yeah, what do you think an advantage of spidergrams are?
I don't really know because I've never used it before.
Do you think it's something that, if you sat down and you're thinking about writing your CV, do you think you could just do a spidergram and just, oh, this is what I've done, this is what I've done, and then add on to it later on?
Yeah,
So it's that, yeah, it's your ideas. It's new things. You add on a branch for each new thing. And it's really good, interesting to use because a lot of people use them for revising, but also for assignments. If you're breaking down the assignment, to use a spidergram, what I need to put in it, what I don't need to put in it, or a bit on the spidergram we saw was on main introduction, main body, conclusion, and reference that could be around it, and then branch off from each one on what you want to do. So these examples are on Moodle for you to have a look at. The other one, I did have one more, which was factual text. And this looks at different types of text that you can use in regards to, and again, this is on Moodle for you. It's a document with different types of factual text that you can use and how this will help you. So it's just looking at what things you do before you read, instructions, and just slotting in the news reports, how you slot in the wording around it and fill in the gaps. True or false scenarios. This is just an idea for you to have a look at on factual texts. These again are on Moodle. Now I'm just going to bring up so we've done learning outcome 1, 2, and 3. Any questions before we have a look at the assignment? So the assignment area is, let me just get up. Again, there would be access for this on Moodle for you to have a look at. Additional sources, all your references, everything is on Moodle for you to have a look at. So when we look at the academic writing, okay, this is the front cover that you need to be looking at. So your name needs to go in there. Your center needs to go in there. Your tutor's name in there. Your unit code, which would go in there. And indicative content. So part A, they expect you to do 250 to 500 words. And part B, they expect you to do 750 to 1,000 words. So the assignment title is part A is to draw up a plan for a written response to a question. Part B is to provide a logical response. And this essay must be specifically for this unit. So the assignment for the unit is 1 of 1. It's number of credits, the date it's due, and your student declaration. Your student declaration will look at your word count, and your student declaration would say that you haven't, it literally says that I understand that copying, taking ideas from other sources, for example, reference books, journals, internet, and tutor handouts without acknowledging them is plagiarism. I confirm that this assignment is all my own work. All contributions taken from other reading and research have been referenced. So here you are using the Harvard system for referencing. Any direct quotations taken from other reading and research have been acknowledged and attributed, and I've attached a bibliography listing all the sources used in producing this assignment. I've added the word count below, unless otherwise the word count indicated above is acceptable. I have read and understand the Ascentis document entitled Policies and Procedures for Dealing with Malpractice provided by the tutor and understand the consequences of non-compliance with this document. So this is identifying that you haven't plagiarized any work and you will sign the declaration there. Do you all understand that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So let's go on to the assignment. So there's two parts to the assignment. Assignment brief. You've got part A and part B. Make sure when you are doing your assignment, you have headings for everything you do, okay? So part A is to draw up a plan for a written response to a question, 250 to 500 words. And that's learning outcome 1, 2, and 3. So here you need to interpret the meaning and implication of the question. So unpack the question, that's learning outcome 1.2. Identify some appropriate terms and concepts relevant to an understanding of the question. So that's learning outcome 1.1. Explain the impact of the target audience on the selection and use of information. That's learning outcome 3.1. Draw up a plan for a written response to the questions, and that's learning outcome 2.1. That's part A. So for each one, you have in each heading. So you will do it, you will put part A, okay, and you will put this as one heading and write about this. Do you all understand?
Yeah.
So it's clearer for the person marking it that you have done each part of that, okay? So you need to put that as a heading. You need to put your name on it. On the assignment, you need to put your name, your unit title, your unit number, your number, and you need to start off with, you know, maybe if you want a contents page, you can have that in, and then have each one. So you would do this bit of the assignment first, part A. Then in part A, you would do this separately. There, that bit. And then part, you would do that as a heading. Then you would do that bit as a heading. So each one will have a heading. Why is it so important to have a heading for each part? Why do you think it's so?
I think it highlights the work for the person who will be marking to know.
Yes,
what
excellent.
you are
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, it's important. So how many elements do you have to do in part A? If you're doing 4 headings, how many do you have to do?
Part A.
4. Excellent. You have to do 4. So firstly, you need to interpret the meaning and implication of the question, unpack the question. Secondly, identify some appropriate terms and concepts relevant to understanding the question. Thirdly, explain the impact of the target audience on the selection and use of information. And fourthly, draw up a plan for written response, okay? Each of them needs to be part A. Each one, there's 4 parts, and you need to have a heading for each one, okay? Part B, present a logical and reasoned response, 750 to 1,000 words to the question planned in part A. So here, again, you are referring to the question that you've planned in part A, and you are working around that. In that, you need to ensure that the response to the question is logical, appropriate, and reasoned. And that's learning outcome 2.2. You need to use appropriate language and register, which is learning outcome 3.2. Okay, the written response in the appropriate for the subject area. The work presented must be at an appropriate academic level, level 2, and use accepted academic conventions. Sources must be acknowledged using Harvard referencing conventions, and information must be expressed using standard English. This essay must be written specifically for this unit and not used elsewhere on other units. So here, you look at this. So the student, this is what the marker will be looking at, and this is what the student needs to do. So for the first part, you need to produce, you need to interpret the meaning and implications of the specific question. You need to 1.2 identify appropriate terms and concepts relevant to understanding of the specific question. You need to devise a detailed plan for written response to a specific question, and you need to use the plan in learning outcome 2 to write a coherent and logical response. And 2.3, you need to present the response in appropriate format. In learning outcome 3, you need to write accurately following accepted written language conventions and use appropriate style and register an awareness of audience and use accurately a standard form of referencing. Do you all understand this? This is the assignment brief here. So for the first one, part A, you're doing 250 to 500 words. So it's not a huge amount of words, okay? And each one you're looking at separately. For the second one, you're doing 750 words to 1,000 words, okay? And you're looking at the responses, how you need to look at learning outcome 2, learning outcome 3.2, the appropriate language you use, why is it so important, things like that. You need to come up with a question yourself as well, okay?
Mhm.
Has anyone got any questions on the assignment bit? Make sure you are doing your Harvard referencing. Make sure you are doing everything with the headings on so that the person marking it is able to mark it. Make sure you are referencing within text as well. Make sure you put your name on, what element you're doing, your unit on it as well, and make sure that once your assignment is submitted, it's submitted to learner@ukvarsity.co.uk. And use the recorded lectures that we've got, learning outcome 1, 2, and 3, to help and support you in doing this. Has anyone got any questions? Make sure you fill out this top bit as well for Ascentis as a front cover.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Can
Let's see who is speaking. It's Claude, yeah, Claude?
Claude, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand the question about the part 2A.
Part A.
Yeah. First one. The first one.
Interpret the meaning and implication of the question. So you need to come up with the question. You know the question that we looked at in learning outcome 1, which
Yes.
looked at hypertension? You need to come up with the question yourself. So you need to have a question in mind yourself that you want to look at. So, you know, you could look at maybe the impact of diabetes or something like that, you know, any sort of question that you want to look at, and you need to look at the command words. So you might be able to look at describing or looking at the difference, you know. These command words will help you. So you need to look at the command words and come up with something that will identify what you are talking about. You know, you can't be talking about the hypertension. That's a sample question. You can look at command words such as describe, analyze, you know, things like, you know, define, you know, so you need to come up with the question, Claude.
Okay, just we have to identify the subject myself.
Yeah, you have to identify the subject yourself. And there's some examples on, you know, on Moodle. They've
Yeah.
put example assignments on there, you know, sample ones that you
Yes,
can look at. Yeah, have a look
Yeah.
at them. They may be able to help you. You
Yes,
know,
please.
have a look at them. They're on Moodle. I've told Ammon to open them up on Moodle, but also told him to put some on Moodle so that you could look at as well to help you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And they're on Moodle to help you. So you need to unpack the question, you know, come up with something yourself. And it doesn't have to be a big question, you know, it might be describe the impact on diabetes on elderly patients, or it might be define the main elements of diabetes or dementia. You know, it might be something not quite huge, but you know, but you would need to come up with it yourself. And I think he will put samples on Moodle for you as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Is there
Mm.
any other questions before we finish off this session today?
No.
Mm.
Fine. It's good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It would be, you know, you would be looking at, you know, also look at this. This will help you a lot as well. You know, this little grid here, this is the assessment criteria, and this would help you as well a lot, what you need to put in and what the implications are. But, you know, your assignment brief is there, but you've got 6 elements there, and then you've got you've got elements there. There's about 8 there, but it identifies what you need to do in each one. So, because some of them you're using, you know, learning outcome 2 and learning outcome 3, 4, and some of them you're using 2.1 or 1.1, and it clearly identifies that when you're looking at your, you know, your PowerPoint slides. It tells you where, you know, you should be looking. I'll just give you an example. Let's go back onto one of the slides. And if you look at the slides here, one of them, let's go to learning outcome 1, and maybe an example for you. When it says that you've got 1.2, that's where you look at key concepts. Then you go on further and it tells you about not maybe learning outcome 2, maybe another example. Let's go on to learning outcome 3, maybe. So it says learning outcome 3. Let's have a look at this. It says, can you see that? It says 3.3. Yeah?
Yes.
And that's where you'll be looking at 3.3. If it says 3.2 there, that's where you'll be looking at 3.2 in your assignment.
Yeah, use appropriate style and register showing an awareness of audience. Okay.
Yeah, but whatever it's asking you in the question, so let's go back again to the assignment. Whatever it's asking you next to it is, look, it says 1.2, doesn't it? It says 1.1, 3.1, 2.1, 2.2, 3.2. So it tells you from the slides where you need to be looking.
Yes.
So it's quite clear. And remember that the wording is not a huge amount of words. For the first one, you know, part A is 250 to 500 words, which is not a huge amount. And then for part 2, it's a little bit more, which is 750 to 1,000 words.
Mm.
And make sure that, you know, when you are referencing in text, you are using the author's name and the year. Okay, this is in text. When you're referencing in the reference page at the back, make sure you are using the full references.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
and make sure you are using the Harvard referencing system, because that's the one that UK has to use. And make sure you are referencing fully towards the end. So, you know, if you are referencing, like, you know, I'll give you another example of the referencing at the end. Where's the referencing? Let me just have a
Okay.
look.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, in total, the word count for the both assignments, part A and B, should be around 100.
5.
No.
100, 500 without the reference.
1,000.
100, not 100, no.
Sorry, 1,500
Yeah,
without the
yeah.
reference.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't count the reference to
1,500,
it.
but you know, you're not gonna
Add the
1,500
reference.
is the maximum. You know, some people might do 400, some people
Okay.
might do 450, you know, so it depends.
Okay,
But
so
then,
it doesn't include the reference. It's only
no, but
okay.
the references, remember, you're just gonna have a list of all your sources on the
Yeah.
references. You know, you're just gonna list your resources on that.
Okay, that's fine.
There'll be things like this. Look, I'll show you. Just let me go back into that so you've got a bit of an idea. This is like your references there. Look, it showed this is how you reference at the end. Okay? So you will have a reference list at the end. You know, sometimes it might be 4 books, it might be 5 books, it might be more, it might be 3, it might be, you know, it depends on what you do, okay? Has anyone got any more questions before we finish off now?
No.
Anyone? Thank you for attending today's session.
Thank you.
It was lovely teaching you. And I will see you hopefully in the next session if I have one with you. And good luck with your assignment. If you have any issues, please email learnerworks@ukvarsity.co.uk and use the additional resources on Moodle that are available for you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day, the rest of it. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.